I've seen a lot of videos online recently about Caitlyn as a kid or what she thought of when she became dictator, etc. So today I figured why not just understand who Caitlyn is? Why not dive deep into who she is as a person and why she is the way she is? Let's begin and understand who Caitlyn Kiramman is. In the first 3 episodes, we do get Caitlyn as a child. It is so important to understand who she was and what she was interested in. Season 1 helped us understand this perfectly. Caitlyn was first introduced as a 16-year-old, so a teenager and my classmate. It also helped so much that the person she was hanging out with a lot was Jace, her older brother figure and a smart guy. This is something that will help you understand who Caitlyn was as a teen because Jace and his intelligence and more so science approach plays a sort of huge part in it. Now, we don't actually get more than like 4 scenes with Caitlyn in it, but it sets up a lot for us to understand. One thing that we can see off the bat is that Caitlyn is scared of Zahn. She even mentions it to Jace in the first scene. Is this a bad thing? No. Just because O Block has good people in it and I do feel bad for them because of the systematic racism, I am not walking through that block. I'm finding a car and hitting the highway beside it. However, it is nice to see Caitlyn is curious. She does not just insult the place or scold Jace, but rather question if it was worth it. It shows that she has a deeper understanding of the systematic destruction of Zahn and that it isn't all horrible, filled with just horrible people. We can understand young Caitlyn felt bad for what her people did and thus sort of feared that Jace might have been hurt because of that. This is further proven through her mother, Cassandra. As we learn in Season 2, Cassandra is a definitely left-wing politician, interested in peace and growing both Zahn and Piltover. As we know, she was responsible for the better ventilation system Zahn has. This ties into the next thing we can understand about Caitlyn as a teen. Caitlyn believes in second chances and understanding the reasons. For example, she defends Jace every step of the way because she knows he was robbed. Yeah, everyone knew that. But how many people did you see defend him? I saw one person and that was Caitlyn. Her mother's influence of peace and understanding and growing together is a big reason as to why Caitlyn is so understanding of everything. She listens and learns. She appreciates and doesn't hate. Young Caitlyn isn't your average spoiled brat, but rather someone who appreciates their position in society and someone who is willing to use their power for the better of society. I think as I conclude young Caitlyn, we can understand that she is a left-wing, peace-offering, curious teenager who sneaks girls into her room as we see her mom not be surprised when Vi is there. Young Caitlyn is someone who appreciates their power in society and wants to use that to help the rest of the world, sort of like a nicer Luigi. Free my boy. Overall, young Caitlyn is a person of peace and curiosity, a person who struggles with their own issues and identity just like every other teenager. Pre-attack is Caitlyn from Season 1, before her mom dies. Caitlyn is different now. About 7 years later and a job as an enforcer, Caitlyn no longer looks at life with the question why. She now understands reality and is still a little scared of Zahn, which is understandable because she lacks the experience needed. One thing from the start we can see is that she is always being held back. She has the capabilities to be a great enforcer and we see her detective skills that could genuinely help the nation in a big way. But her mom and Marcus, which is Silco's basically pet, holds her back. This ruins her relationship with Cassandra in a big way and essentially causes Caitlyn to not be as politically involved as I believe she was at one point. I also believe her becoming an enforcer means she is more grounded on reality and strays from the dreaming mindset her mother once gave her. This comes in handy when looking at why she makes the decisions she does later on. As we see her talk with Vi in episode 5, we can see a glimpse of her sexuality peek out, as there is no doubt Caitlyn felt at least a little bit of an attraction towards Vi. This is not something that is a huge deal, but definitely tells us that she has now formed an identity. She is Caitlyn, the kind, the brave, and the willing to do the right thing. However, in the same conversation, we understand she is still too naive, not yet understanding the reality of how the world works, and this comes from her always being held back. See, Caitlyn not given the right opportunities to grow as an enforcer or politician, etc., makes her judge and think with emotional factors involved. We see this a lot in the prison scene as she releases Vi and trusts a prisoner who hasn't given much of anything so far. This is solely the work of Kate's emotions, and that's completely fine. One last thing we can understand about Caitlyn before the next segment is that she still loves Piltover. She loves her job as an enforcer and hates hearing about the truth that her people have caused. Vi telling her that enforcers are evil probably played a small factor in Caitlyn releasing her, as a way to prove to the world that she isn't the one in the wrong. Another thing we see a lot of. Caitlyn's ego, essentially, is what I mean. Overall, before meeting Vi, Caitlyn is now a grown adult, a person with their own identity, still naive and lacking proper judgment, but nonetheless a determination to do the right thing and prove to the world she isn't like the rest and actually cares about making a difference. She is an adult with a pride for her nation and pride for her job and her hard work, hating people that undermine her efforts. Or Vi was probably the greatest thing that happened to Caitlyn. Vi was basically a revolution to everything Caitlyn thought was right or wrong. See, up until Vi, Caitlyn has been a naive and good person, but still influenced by her family pride and the power of enforcers. Of course, she understands that people of Zaun hate her kind, but Vi is the first experience of the real world for Caitlyn. Vi is the first time Caitlyn gets the required experience to grow as a person and develop a proper mindset. So you could say without Vi, Caitlyn would be your average rich girl who really wants to make a change but doesn't know a single thing about it. Take this scene for example. Caitlyn is frustrated with Vi for her blaming every problem on enforcers and the topsiders, but at the same time understands Vi's perspective because she has traveled so much already with her. Caitlyn seeing the tents and the bar and the poverty, shimmer addiction is all a lot of stuff that arguably someone should not see. But Vi leading Caitlyn through this is a sort of a way for Caitlyn to understand what Zaun is really like. Because as an enforcer, she has only ever heard of the negatives and the crime and the shimmer. Take this moment for example, where she asks why someone would take a drug. She doesn't understand the basic emotions of people. She doesn't understand what her position is in the real world. See, while as a kid, she did appreciate her position in society, and I'm sure she still does, Caitlyn needed this moment with the shimmer addict to understand that she could have very well become an addict herself. She knows she also craves respect. She knows that she relates to the stranger, and yet life takes a different route because she is from a respected household, clean area, and Piltover. Another way we can understand Caitlyn now that she has met Vi is as someone who understands Vi. I know that sounds confusing, but listen to me for a bit. We know Caitlyn has already formed a bit of connection to Vi, if not a lot, because we see her save Vi, trade her family gun for it, literally the symbolization of Kate trading her pride for the safety of Vi. We know that she trusts Vi now because she was good enough to do what she was released to do. However, Caitlyn is still surprised and genuinely pained when she understands that her people, enforcers, are the reason Vi is an orphan. Imagine knowing the person you love is the way they are because of your people, and you have supported your people this entire time. And sure, it wasn't Caitlyn's fault, but we can see it changes her view on the world. She finally understands her own mother. She understands why Zaun is so hurt, because for every Vi, there are thousands who couldn't get the chance to prove they were good people before Piltover destroyed them. She understands capitalism and her impact on society. This change is beautiful and makes me love Caitlyn's growth and character at this moment. It makes us relate to Caitlyn because we all feel bad for Vi together. The last thing I want you to focus on is Vi talking to Echo. This is the first and last time they ever talk, but man, it is so important to understand Caitlyn. Why? Because it summarizes this entire segment. Caitlyn shows that she now understands what her own mother stood for. Peace. She understands that enforcers and Piltover have destroyed Zaun and caused both Jinx and Vi. Two sides of a coin, but the same creator. Caitlyn shows that she now knows the cycle of violence her own mother has tried to stop. The cycle of repeated blaming and fighting. In the end, meeting Vi and her growth because of it helps us understand Caitlyn as someone who is now experienced. Someone who has a strong identity and a purpose. Someone willing to help with their power and change the social class pain. Someone who knows right and wrong, not because of influence, but rather because of experience. Someone who, while not part of the problem, accepts their own lack of part in the solution. I love Caitlyn after she met Vi. I love who Caitlyn is at this moment because I feel even though she isn't perfect, she is willing to try. Sometimes that's all that matters. This small segment will essentially end Season 1 and start Season 2 for us. It will help us understand how Caitlyn thinks and what she really desires in this world. Starting off, we understand Caitlyn's true feelings for Vi. We understand that while she is becoming a good person, a genuine helping hand, she is also doing it for Vi, which isn't wrong at all, but does make a huge difference if, for example, Vi ever fights with her. Then she loses her purpose to help. We see this right here, where Caitlyn just gives up. We don't see her fight for Vi or for Zaun or confront her mother again, but rather just accept what happened. It is the first sign that Caitlyn still doesn't really care for the people of Zaun, and she doesn't have to. But it definitely makes sense why people consider her a wrong character in many ways. Another thing we can understand about Caitlyn at this moment is that she is too in love with Vi. She knows that the best thing she can do is kill Jinx, and then shoot Silco. Zaun would be savable, would appreciate that, and yet she hesitates. She rethinks everything for Vi. This love and connection that she has built over the last segment ends up hurting her growth and helping Zaun. She could have saved Zaun, literally destroying the virus, but her love screwed her. Another example of Caitlyn's emotional factor outweighing her realistic factor. Let's move into Season 2 now. The attack is done and Caitlyn's mother is dead. I want to focus on this because I've seen so many people hate Caitlyn for her reaction. You have to understand a few things to understand Caitlyn at this moment. So I figured, why not understand Caitlyn in Season 2? Let's begin. It is still crucial to understand that Cassandra was in Caitlyn's life. Just because they were rich does not mean she was a bad mother. Throughout Season 1, she has always seemed involved and caring of both Caitlyn and Zaun. Cassandra was so involved in Caitlyn's life, she carved the idea of peace and caring and helping Zaun into Caitlyn. We know that Caitlyn loves her mother, and thus the anger of losing her is obviously going to be huge. I completely understand her decision to go and force Zaun into giving Jinx up. Jinx deserves to be caught because Cassandra was a good person, not a rich scum, but rather someone who appreciated their power and used it for good. To a certain degree, you might think that Cassandra, of all people, dying is an insult from Zaun to everything she did for them, and so we understand a little bit of why Caitlyn was so mad. Let's ask a question that makes a lot of sense. Why is she mad at Zaun? Why not Jinx or Silco, but why Zaun? She even mentions to Jace how easy it is to hate Zaun for the actions of one person. Well, this is because Zaun sticks together. She experienced this firsthand and knows that no one would give Jinx up. This, in Caitlyn's eyes, is betrayal. Betrayal despite everything Cassandra gave them. It infuriates her that Jinx is being protected like a hero, but not the person who let them breathe. Do you understand a little bit of why Caitlyn is mad at all of Zaun? Of course, she only wants to kill Jinx, but she knows very well that isn't going to be easy, and this sort of plays into my next segment as well, so remember this part. Let's stray away from her anger for a bit and understand her sadness. I want you all to understand Caitlyn's sadness because her anger is very easy to see, whereas she hides her true feelings really well. Caitlyn says in a conversation to Vi that there is a huge hole in her heart now. Of course, there will be that hole after your loved one dies, but the real problem is that there is a burden on Caitlyn's shoulder. She cannot leave and escape Piltover for silent grieving. She now has to fill her mother's shoes as the leader of House Kiramman, but she wants revenge. Seeing her anger is so huge, she can't rest without knowing Jinx is dead. Only that anger tarnishes her mother's legacy of peace. Caitlyn is so stuck between anger, letting go, and sadness that she sort of doesn't have a purpose. At least most of episode 1. Only 2 things do give her purpose. Firstly, she blames herself for not killing Jinx. This self-blaming in turn becomes a second chance with the Enforcer's raid, and Caitlyn will not miss the next chance. Secondly, the memorial attack happens, and now she has her purpose, revenge. She no longer cares for her mother's legacy or herself or resting. She only cares about killing Jinx, and Mbessa was a genius for this attack. She played Caitlyn every step of the way. She knew Caitlyn had the shot and thus knew half of her mind was already wanting a second chance at violence. She simply turned the other half as well. It is also very important to note that in the Vi and Caitlyn conversation after the memorial attack, Caitlyn says what kind of, and she takes a sort of pause before saying animals as if it is a slur. This is so hateful in a whole nother level that you have to understand it. I know a lot of people will probably think she just says animals as an insult, but you have to understand she forced herself to say it. If it was up to her, she might have said something a lot different. And it really makes you understand that she knows all of Zaun now is connected. She finally understands that, well, at least in her mind, that perhaps Jinx is not the only one behind these attacks. This is the segment where I clear a few things up. Caitlyn doesn't want to hurt all of Zaun. I fear people don't understand that she tried to solve the issue with as few casualties as she could. But the real issue with the Squatter Strike Team episodes was Vi. You have to really understand this, so lock in. For her, Vi represents the good in Zaun, the side that does not support Jinx. So when Vi tells Caitlyn, hey, let's go and make a squad, then we'll catch Jinx and no one will get hurt, Caitlyn says, sure Vi, I believe that you represent Zaun, and I believe you. Thus you with me means Zaun is with me, giving herself a false expectation from Zaun and especially a false expectation from Vi. Arguably, Vi makes the greatest mistake this season in letting Caitlyn be angry. She doesn't try even once to explain that the gray is wrong or this hate will not go away, etc. Anything she could have told her would have helped in some way, but instead she fuels Caitlyn's anger and hate and lets Caitlyn walk all over Zaun to find Jinx. Now my best approach would have been by just leaving, but I think I'd rather make another video on that. Overall, my point being, Vi fueled Caitlyn, made her believe all of Zaun stands with her, made her believe Jinx will die and Vi will help do it, only for her to not do it. Do you understand how frustrated Caitlyn must have been at that moment? Imagine knowing it all worked out. A few weeks of straight pain and work finally pays off as you get the easiest shot of your life. For Caitlyn, shooting Jinx and not hitting Isha was light work. She's done this since she was a kid. But Vi stops her, and I fully believe it was because she still loves Jinx. I believe Vi played Caitlyn in this segment, finding a way to reach Jinx honestly and try to help her again. But I completely understand Caitlyn at this moment. She has now lost 2 times to Jinx because of Vi, because of her love, or better said, because of herself. Therefore, when she returns to Piltover, when she sees the gray everywhere, people getting sick and injured, her people, she blames her love and her feelings and herself. So as this segment ends, Caitlyn becomes the martial law dictator. I want you to understand, Caitlyn was given a false promise from Vi. She was told Jinx has to die. She was told no one would get hurt from this. And yet when it came down to completing her promise, Vi fumbled. Jinx survived and Piltover got attacked again. So I understand and justify Caitlyn for every action so far. It is all understandable and was not evil. Caitlyn didn't want to hurt every person in Zaun, but as she climbed those stairs, as she put on that cape and looked at her nation in pain, she understood that someone needs to be the bad guy. Someone needs to use evil to do good, and she made herself the human sacrifice for the end of violence. A poetic turn. In this time period, Caitlyn was at her worst. Only purpose was finding Jinx, and she was obsessed with it. We can understand a few things about Caitlyn in this dictator time period, so let's go over them. For starters, Caitlyn was broken. Having left Vi at the bottom of the tunnel and fully accepting her newfound martial law position, Caitlyn had nothing to care for in the 3-ish months time skip. Nothing except finding Jinx. And Mbessa knew this, manipulating and using this broken Caitlyn to take control of Piltover. The biggest problem was Caitlyn didn't mind it. She had nothing left in life and was too unmotivated/tired to do anything against Mbessa. We can see how Mbessa manipulates a tired Caitlyn every time she's about to give up. I know a lot of people don't notice how tired she is and think she still wants to hunt Jinx and kill Jinx, but every time we see her, we notice the lack of anger and emotion in her eyes and expressions. In this scene with Mbessa, which I did make a video on, this is the most important scene in Arcane Season 2, and you missed it. While I was rewatching Arcane Season 2, I couldn't help but notice this scene right here. As Mbessa and Kate talk about the recent Zaun attack conducted by Isha but blamed on Jinx, you can literally see how visibly against Caitlyn is to every move by Mbessa. Before I begin, I want to say that this is important for all the people who thought Caitlyn switches sides because of the word cupcake.
Don't sugarcoat it, cupcake.
Switching sides.
You're not completely right, so watch the rest of the video. Let's begin, and spoiler warning for Arcane Season 2. This scene begins with a short clip of Caitlyn's fireplace. We see this exact fire many times in the show, and yet it symbolizes something different every time. For example, in this scene specifically, Episode 4 Season 2, it symbolizes Caitlyn's will to fight Zaun and capture Jinx, her literal burning hatred that she holds for Jinx. Of course, if you don't remember, Jinx is the reason Caitlyn's mom is dead. In Episode 9, we see the same fireplace lit up, but this time it is Vi and Caitlyn's will to live and continue living together in love, despite the setbacks and losses both have faced. So why is a fireplace so important? Because later on in this scene, Mbessa begins to poke the log and create more heat, as she is making the fire stay or grow. She is also manipulating Caitlyn by making her think that she is forgiving Jinx. In fact, she even succeeds at the end and therefore poked Caitlyn's burning log until her fire stayed, if not grew. Now that we've moved on from the fireplace, let's take a look at this part of the scene. Maddie and Caitlyn talk about the possibility of a Jinx copycat, and that Piltover has made Zaun desperate. Just as Maddie brings up leaving Mbessa and making peace, the two are interrupted by Mbessa. This reminded me a lot of the devil and angel on your shoulder memes that we would get in cartoons. The angel side in this case is Maddie, who is telling Caitlyn what she also agrees with, to love and forgive Zaun while still punishing only one person. Meanwhile, Mbessa is the devil, poking Caitlyn's fire and making her more violent. This duality is what confuses Caitlyn the most throughout the season, and is why Vi was so important to Caitlyn's changing sides.
Don't sugarcoat it, cupcake.
Switching sides.
She needed one more person to tip towards the angel or devil side. However, I see one more hidden detail in this scene. Knowing that Maddie is a double agent for Noxus, it is possible that she was ordered to talk about peace and forgiveness so that Caitlyn never reaches her true potential in the Noxus eyes. See, one thing about Noxus that you may not know is they are all about strength. Not just physical or fighting capabilities, but also intelligence and cunning manipulation. We see this the most with the Black Rose and LeBlanc, but that's another topic for another day. Basically, what I'm saying is that Mbessa wants to make Caitlyn violent and destructive, but not to her potential, so which could possibly damage Mbessa. So she makes Maddie seduce and manipulate Caitlyn on the other side, creating balance. At last, we've reached the best part about this scene, the line of light. In animation, it is important to know that everything has a reason. You don't have to make the light and window curtains create a perfect line like they do right here. This was done on purpose to show you duality. Caitlyn stays on the right side this entire scene, closer to the evidence than the fire, showing she wants to make smart and peaceful moves to get Jinx and not be violent. And Mbessa goes directly to the fireplace, symbolizing her wants for violence. Check this out. Notice who goes closest to the line first and who takes their time. This literally shows you the maturity difference in Mbessa and Caitlyn. Kate is rational and hasty, confused and lost. She immediately is about to switch sides. Once Mbessa realizes this, then she starts walking forwards, holding Kate's shoulder and attempts to manipulate her. The question. Caitlyn asks a very powerful question to Mbessa, which I often ask to the world. Why is peace always the justification for violence? I feel like this reminded me of when I was a child, asking my parents or any other adults questions about subjects like God and religious wars. Seeing them run away was always a sign that even they did not believe in forcing someone to convert, but it was just out there into the books and they had to listen. In this scene, after her question, we see Mbessa completely run away, knowing there is no peace in violence. She knows she has no answer, and so she runs back to the fireplace, poking it for more heat as she changes the topic and tells Caitlyn she is forgiving Jinx, and Mbessa is surprised at her mental strength to do so. This is peak gaslighting. This single-handedly causes Caitlyn to do everything she does after this scene in both acts, because she would hate her peaceful side if that meant killing Jinx. Dodging the question and turning it on to Kate is why Mbessa had control for so long and was such a good villain. There you have it. This is my analysis of the most important scene in Arcane Season 2, as without this scene, we would never truly understand what type of person Caitlyn is, and instead think she's the villain that she is portrayed to be. Secondly, we notice how cold Caitlyn has gotten. She no longer feels any emotions with matters and does not look at anything with the emotional factors involved. She learned her mistakes with Vi and herself in Season 1, now becoming stronger mentally like a true Noxian woman would. Good teachings by Mbessa. We see this in her scenes with Maddie, her scenes with Singed, and her scenes with Mbessa. She no longer thinks emotionally and has lost purpose, seeing only her mission in life to capture Jinx. However, she desperately desires her emotions back. Her scenes with Maddie show us that she merely uses Maddie to feel a sense of warmth, an attempt at feeling how she did with Vi. We see with Mbessa, she tries hard to feel angry and find the strength to leave Mbessa, yet she cannot. With Singed, we can see Caitlyn feel emotions for the first time in a while, but she tries to suppress her sadness over seeing Oriana and tries to be cold again. It is easy for us to understand that Caitlyn is trying to feel emotions, trying to go back to her old life, yet also suppresses herself when she gets emotional. Just like characters such as Darth Vader, Caitlyn is stuck in this cycle of violence and peace and cannot leave due to the lack of a purpose. Finally, we see how Vi brings Caitlyn back to the light. While a lot of people make the joke that Caitlyn switches due to the word cupcake, it is more so the feeling of her old self that she runs back for. Caitlyn understands now, and we understand her now, that she desires her emotions back, her warmth, her love, her anger, and power, her purpose. Vi is the tipping point for Caitlyn to switch on one side of the scale, and luckily it tips in the direction of old Caitlyn. We can see from this, we can understand from this that Caitlyn hates herself so much that Vi is the only reason she ever realizes she can fix her mistakes and switches back. Overall, during her dictator phase, we can understand Caitlyn as a tired soul, a person without purpose or emotions, someone who acknowledges they are in the wrong, however has no energy or motivation to fight and do the right thing again, allowing whoever to manipulate her in the hopes that one ignites a fire in her heart. Mbessa was the person who ignited Kate's fire the most, yet Vi ignited Kate's fire for good. At last, we have current Caitlyn. Let's understand who she is. Well, for one, she still hates herself very much. We can see her even forgive Jinx and let her have a second chance at life, because she sees herself equal to Jinx. Why did Caitlyn forgive Jinx? She had the biggest terrorist and war criminal in her prison, held captive and calm. She could have sent her to trial, heck, could have killed the murderer of her mom and countless innocent and important lives. But instead, she forgave her. She let Vi free Jinx and gave her a chance to leave. Of course, she also got something else for that. Let's begin. While we do see Jinx have her own realizations of the cycle through Silco, Caitlyn has a similar one through this conversation with Vi. As we see, Caitlyn gets berated by Vi for everything, and while it was shorter than it should have been, both characters finally got their anger out on one another. However, after 3-ish months of putting Zahn through hell, or rather allowing Mbessa to do as she pleases, Caitlyn was way more in the wrong than Jinx, and Vi let her know it. We see in this moment right here as Caitlyn snaps and lets Vi know that she knows how much of a villain she is. Caitlyn rushes to get Vi's support and is met with a good question instead. Who decides who gets a second chance? This question was the spark Kate needed for her to understand the cycle that has been happening in their nation. One person from Zon gains power and attacks the ultra-wealthy of Piltover, leading to attacks from Piltover and thus more attacks from Zon. Caitlyn understands that her mother fought against this cycle, and yet her death made Caitlyn redo the exact same mistakes countless rich scums have done to Zon. This is where I believe Caitlyn thought of herself as equal to Jinx, if not worse, realizing that the jokes I made of her being the mustache man are true from a certain perspective. Sorry, just had to add that for how many people got mad at my last video about it. But my main point being, Caitlyn understood a cycle that she too was a part of, and thought of herself worse than Jinx. This is probably the main reason she forgave Jinx and gave her a second chance. Not for Vi or for Jinx, etc., but for the cycle of endless pain to end between Zon and Piltover, and perhaps a second chance for herself. Let's continue our discussion from the question Vi posed on Caitlyn and analyze a few things. First thing we can notice in this scene overall is Caitlyn realizing how hurt Vi is. It was in the opening of this scene. Now, of course, if she can see Vi completely hurt, and we assume she was the one sleeping beside Vi on the bed, it is safe to say she understood how much damage her own actions caused someone she loves. By this, I'm trying to say that Vi being hurt showed Caitlyn how to love again, how to be morally right again, and what her actions can do. Because while Jinx is the reason her mom is dead, Caitlyn was about to be the reason why Vi might be dead. This fear of Vi dying is one of the major things we can add into why Caitlyn forgave Jinx, because she realized both her and Jinx hurt people Caitlyn loves. Second thing I noticed in this scene overall is how much Caitlyn learned from Mbessa. See, this is something very, very minor and probably isn't true, but No Life for Me noticed this, and I have to tell you, I believe Caitlyn tried to manipulate Vi at this moment, tried to play on the fact that Jinx is still wanted and still a criminal, while trying to show Vi that she understands her position in all of this. If you think about it, she could have just hugged Vi, told her she wanted to wait for her, but instead we got this heated conversation before Caitlyn finally told the truth. She wanted Vi to be on her side, failed at it, and decided to just spill the truth as a last-ditch effort to manipulate Vi. It didn't work, but it is very similar to the tactic Mbessa used in the Caitlyn video I made. Go check it out. This adds into Caitlyn forgiving Jinx because she knew that if her own lover couldn't agree with her in that moment, how much better of a person is she really? This guilt made her forgive Jinx. Final thing we can notice in this Vi and Caitlyn scene is Vi noticing and making a small facial expression of realization when Caitlyn brings up where Jinx is located at the moment. This has nothing to do with Caitlyn forgiving Jinx, currently at least, but it does have to do with how Caitlyn planned to let Jinx go. She walked into the bunker knowing Vi might come by later, talked with Jinx and understood that Jinx doesn't want to leave. As a reason to forgive her, and see I'm contradicting my own point, she sent all the guards to the Hex Gates and waited for a while until she could either find Jinx and Vi happy, or Vi alone in the cell. This was smart from Caitlyn as she got some fun because of this and let Jinx go. The final subject I want to talk about today is when Jinx and Caitlyn talked in the cell. It felt like Caitlyn wasn't really talking to anyone, and rather just confronting herself. Throughout the conversation, Jinx just agreed with Caitlyn's inner thoughts and really brought nothing to the table. It was like a long conversation of Caitlyn talking and accepting her own mistakes while confronting herself. It was like a therapy session for Caitlyn. And so this really helped Caitlyn realize that she is in the wrong just as much as Jinx is. And if she wants to be forgiven by Vi and by the city of Piltover and Zon, she has to forgive the new hero of Zon, Jinx. These are 3 subjects I found in episode 8, providing us the reasons why Caitlyn forgave Jinx. And it mostly stems from Caitlyn considering herself equal to Jinx, thus forgiving herself for her own actions. This helps us understand that Caitlyn is remorseful. She isn't looking for forgiveness or letting her actions disappear. She knows what she did was wrong and that she ruined her mother's legacy. For this, at the end of the show, she even gives up her own seat at the council to Savika, committing an action her mother would be proud of, and as a way to hopefully break the cycle for good. We also see she has a purpose again. We know how badly she cared and worked to save Vi after episode 6, because she places Vi in her main bed and we get some flashback scenes. Not the bedroom Maddie slept in, but rather her original bed from season 1. We can also notice how she slept beside Vi with all those pillows this entire time. What I'm getting at here is we can understand Caitlyn has a purpose now, something to live for again, Vi. Her love for Vi and her care for Vi transcends her hate that she had this entire time, and her empty heart she wanted to have. This is beautiful and exactly why I need a season 3. One final thing we can notice is Caitlyn now uses her emotional factor to motivate herself rather than change her decisions. In the big fight, we can see her get angry, get sad, and get more angry. But she never lets it cloud her judgment, and instead it fuels her energy. This is big time growth. Overall, as I conclude the video, I want you all to understand Caitlyn currently. She is hopefully one real eye and one fake eye person and not just an eye patch, who accepts their mistakes every step of the way and does not want the forgiveness of anyone. She simply tries to make amends and solve the bigger problems, while deciding to let go of the cycle that continues for good. She is a grieving person who ends up taking revenge too far and losing herself in the process, only for her light and purpose to come back in the shape of her love for Vi. Thank you for watching.
Parents pay you to let me win? You held your shot. I saw you. You haven't answered my question.